Spirit of God, come down. Spirit of God, rain down. Spirit of God, come into my life. Spirit of God, rain down. Let your fire fall on me. Oh, Spirit of God, fall on me. Spirit, fall on me. Oh, let your fire fall on me. Oh, Spirit of God, fall on me. Spirit, fall on me. I pray you rain down, rain down in my life, Lord. Rain down, rain. I pray you rain down, rain down in my life, Lord. Rain down, rain. Oh, Spirit of God.
Dear friends, okay, let us continue to reflect on the events related to the life and mission of Elijah the prophet. And in chapter 17, we have seen Elijah practically forbidding rain and dew from falling upon the nation of Israel. And now 3 years of famine are getting over, and everybody thinks negatively about Elijah. The reason, they all think that it is because of the prophet this punishment has come upon them. If the prophet was not there, they would not have received the punishment. That is the way they think. They do not understand that it is the work of Yahweh himself, and Yahweh has decided to punish them with the famine, and Elijah is only an instrument to convey the news of the punishment. He is not the one who is punishing. It is Yahweh. But the people do not understand it. They just think, okay, if Elijah had kept silence, they would have been spared the famine. And that is what they think. But anyhow, the years are gone by, and now Elijah is asked by God, okay, to inform him about the good news. That is, the days of famine are getting over. They can expect rain for them. And that is the great news. That is to be conveyed. And in chapter 18, we find God is speaking to Elijah. Go, present yourself to Ahab. I will send rain on the earth. And Ahab, we know, was so eager to hear of such a news. But Elijah was afraid to go to him because Ahab had determined to kill Elijah if ever he happens to meet him. And therefore, God strengthens him. He is going to meet the king to inform him about the good news. And that is what we will find here. Then here the story begins with the reference to another person called Obadiah. Practically, he was a good Jew, and he saved many from being killed, especially the disciples of Elijah and so on. Because Jezebel was killing all people who were in association with Elijah. And Obadiah tried to save many as he could. And now Ahab is conveying a news. Okay. And Ahab comes to Obadiah saying, and you go all throughout the country and find out water, and if there is some water somewhere, then it can be used for the people, the horses and so on. Therefore, there is no water at all for the animals and also for the human beings, and hence he is entrusted with that task. And at the same time, while he was wandering around to know the sources of water, Elijah happens to meet him. And Obadiah asked Elijah, "Is it my father Elijah?" And then he said, "Yes, I am." And then he says, "I want to meet Ahab, and therefore you go and report to your master Ahab, saying, Elijah wants to meet you." And Elijah is waiting here or in that particular place. But Obadiah is afraid, and he says, "Okay, my master says that he'll be here, but if I go to the king informing him that Elijah is here in this particular town or particular village, and the king will come to meet him, but when the king comes, he will not be there. And naturally, the informant, the one who informs the king, will be put into trouble. And again, it would happen if Elijah says, "Okay, I am here," and by the time the king comes, Elijah will not be there. This was what happened earlier, and therefore he is afraid. But now Elijah says, "Okay, you can go courageously, because I will not go away from here. I'll be here." And thus we see Elijah is coming to encounter Ahab, okay, to face him. And then, okay, in verse 17, chapter 18, verse 17, Ahab comes to meet Elijah. And Ahab went to meet Elijah, and then when they come together, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, you troubler of Israel?" The words of introduction itself is so special. "You troubler of Israel." And therefore, the king Ahab also thinks behind the famine, it is the hand of Elijah. And that's why, "You troubler of Israel." It is it is Elijah himself who has come forward to meet Ahab. But even then, he is in such a mood, we can say. And then Elijah answered, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." Therefore, it is your problem. It is not I, but it is the works you have done, your thought pattern. That is what has created the problem. And that is the answer given by Elijah. And now Elijah says, "Okay, do one thing. Gather the entire people of Israel out on Mount Carmel, and let the let the prophets of Baal and Asherah gather together. 400 prophets of Baal and 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. And let them come together. And let all the people gather together. And we see the entire nation comes to Mount Carmel. And when everybody is assembled on Mount Carmel, Elijah comes to meet the people and says, "How long will you go on limping from one side to another?" And he is in a way asking them to make a decision. You have to accept one God as your God. If Yahweh is your God, then accept him and follow him. If Baal is your God, accept him and follow him. You cannot go on jumping from one to the other. That's not proper. Therefore, you are supposed to make a decision. And that is the meaning of the word spoken by him. And what is the decision to be made? Okay, they are to follow the real true God. But the problem is here, how to discern the real true God. And now Elijah declares to them, "You all have gathered here, and also all the prophets of Baal and Asherah, and I alone am here in the opposite camp. Nobody is there to support me. And therefore, do one thing. All of you together can make a victim for sacrifice. And you have to prepare an altar, put the victim's body there, and then you are to call upon your God so that fire may descend on the victim and burn the victim as a sacrifice. And let the prophets of Baal and the people, they can join together invoking Baal to bring down fire from the heavens. And that is what is requested. And Elijah said, I also will prepare a victim to be offered as a sacrifice, and I will call upon my God to bring fire from above. And now Elijah says, nobody is supposed to give fire to or set fire to the sacrifice. You should call upon your God to come down and burn the sacrifice. And the people, they all agreed because it was fascinating for them. The God who comes down first, and that is what they think. And therefore, the people of Israel are eagerly waiting to see the outcome of this bet or this contest. And this contest is usually known as the contest on Mount Carmel, a contest between Israelites and the prophet of Yahweh, or we can say the prophet of Israel. And therefore we see the opinion of the people is explicit. The God who answers from above with fire, he will be considered the true God. And now we see Elijah again speaks to the followers of Baal. You are so many, and it is so easy for you to prepare an animal and burn it, okay, and offer the sacrifice. But you are not supposed to set fire to the victim. Remember that. They prepared the ground, everything, and then they prepared the victim to be offered, and now they began to call out to their god Baal and Asherah. And while they were praying, usually they may receive an oracle, but here practically nothing happens. And therefore we find an interesting feature. The prophet Elijah is mocking at the people and the prophets of Baal and Asherah. And then he is really using words which are so challenging. In verse 27, 18:27, at noon Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, surely he is a god. Either he is meditating, or he has wandered away, or he is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened. Then they cried aloud, and as was their custom, they cut themselves with swords and lances, and until the blood gushed out over them. As midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering of the oblation, but there was no voice, no answer, and no response. And therefore we can see no voice, no answer, no response. And the efforts of the prophets of Baal and Asherah and the prayer of the people gathered around them did not work out. And that is the meaning of all this. They prayed to Yahweh, but their prayer was not answered. And now what does Elijah do? Now Elijah comes and he prepares the victim. And then what does he do? First of all, he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. In verse 30 and 31, Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of Israel, to whom the word of God came, saying, Israel shall be your name. And now he put the wood in order and cut the bull in pieces, laid it on the wood, and he said, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. Usually oil will be poured on the victim and on the piece of wood and so on, which is being used to ignite the fire, and sometimes oil may be added. Here, what does Elijah speak? He asked the people, saying, okay, now you pour water on the victim and the altar, so that nobody would say afterwards the fire occurred casually or accidentally and so on. And therefore, pour the water on to the victim and above the altar and all year round. And therefore, the water was poured on the victim. And then we see verse 34. Then he said, do it a second time. And they did it a second time. Again he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. That means 4 jars of water being spilled over the victim and the altar. And twice it was done, And now a third time, again, it is to be done. And they did it. And the result, verse 35, we read, so that the water ran all around the altar and filled the trench also with water. Okay, trench, of course, we know. The trench is the small pit dug all around the altar so that the water which is poured onto the altar may be gathered around the altar and that it may not run freely to other places. Okay, therefore, everything was prepared and Elijah prepared the victim and now he is going to pray to Yahweh. And that is also very interesting. At the time of the offering, verse 36, Prophet Elijah came near and said, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that these people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned their hearts back. Verse 38. It is 1838. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust, and even licked up the water that was in the trench. And now we see there was a bet-like situation, and Elijah had challenged the prophets of Baal and Asherah. When they cried out, nothing happened. Hence they were in trouble. Now they see that God is working a great miracle at that particular moment. And when the fire fell on the victim, they began to shout, the Lord indeed is God. The Lord indeed is God. Thus, the people as a whole now embrace Yahweh or faith in Yahweh. Of course, we know earlier at the beginning of the chapter, we find Elijah is asking the people of the other group, okay, if their God is the true God, then let it be so. Therefore, they have to accept and make a decision. And who is the true God? The decision is the result of the bet that they made. And what are the conditions now? Now we see the victim is burned together with the altar. The wood, the stone, everything is destroyed by the fire. And that's what we can say. Anyhow, we see the entire crowd now accepts Yahweh as the true God. And now what does he do? Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal, do not let one of them escape. They then seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the valley of Kidron and killed them there. Thus, in the contest on Mount Carmel, Elijah wins. And this victory is a very great event because the power of God is manifested even over the powers of Yahweh. And that is the meaning of all this. And now the people have come to believe in Yahweh. Hence, Elijah understands it is already time to end the famine. But rain should fall from heaven and what is to be done for that. And that is what we see in the coming paragraph in chapter 18, verse 41. Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is a sound of rushing rain." So Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and then he went back peacefully. But about Elijah went up to the top of the Carmel or Mount Carmel. There he bowed himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, "Go up now, look forward to the sea." He went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." Then he said, "Go again 7 times. At the 7th time he said, "Look, a little cloud no bigger than a person's hand is rising out of the sea." And then he said, "Go say to Ahab, harness your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." In a little while, the heavens grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain. And the end of drought season occurs. The miracle of the rain is there. And therefore we see in chapter 18, the famous contest between the prophet of Baal and Asherah and prophet of Yahweh. Elijah is the only one, and he fights for the sake of Yahweh. And now they have come to a conclusion that Yahweh is the only God. And that is the situation we can see. And the result, as a result of this encounter, all the prophets of Baal and Asherah were killed. And that irritated and angered the queen Jezebel. And she made a solemn oath, within 24 hours, I will make his life also like the life of the dead prophets. That is, within 24 hours, she will kill Elijah, using either directly or indirectly. We know that was the way. And therefore, this is practically the date event that takes place here. And the people as a whole now have come back to Yahweh to some extent, because they have witnessed a great miracle. And this is how we can say, through this contest on Mount Carmel, the author, the Deuteronomistic author especially, has decided to bring Yahwism to the forefront, the Yahwistic religion. We mentioned just altogether the important event stages in the revelation of monotheism, the God of the Hebrews, the God of the fathers, then God of the Hebrews, then Yahweh, the God of Israel, and he is said to be the supreme God. And being the supreme God, we see he is able to do what is needed. There is plenty of rain on one side, and then God blesses the people who are to be promoters of Yahwism and so on. And thus all those who were practically fighting for the reinstallation of Yahwism, and they are happy. Yahweh is the only God. He is the Lord of history. He is the supreme deity, and every other God is servants of every other God is a servant of Yahweh. That is the concept they have. And not only that, he is the only God according to the later revelation. And other gods are practically no more gods. That is what we said earlier. Thus we find the Yahwism in its purity is re-established, and that is the great contribution of the prophet Elijah. And we can see, therefore, Elijah is one who fought for bringing monotheism to the forefront again. And earlier, people had gone away from monotheism, but now he has fought his best to bring the people back to monotheism. And Elijah is considered to be the great prophet of monotheism. And that is what we can see in the history that is narrated in chapter 18. Okay, we will come to analyze the life and the events that occur in the life of Elijah in the coming sessions. Okay, thank you.
Loving God, we thank you for the blessing of reading your word together. We ask that these words of life, truth, and hope would continue to impact us in the days ahead. May your love and grace follow each of us, refreshed and blessed by you. Amen.